Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the IX&DAO 5303. This watch is available from watchdives.com with 3 movement options. The PT5000 is $259, the SW200-1 is $329, and the ETA 2824-2 is $399 respectively. You can use the discount code WR4K to get $10 discount off any watch on watchdives.com. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. So the watch comes in this black plastic pelican style case, so I'll show you the interior. As you can see, the underside of the lid has a protective foam panel, and the watch sits in the base on a padded pillow cushion as one would expect. The padded pillow cushion is fully upholstered with a black velour fabric to a good standard, and that sits inside a foam cutout panel. So good snug fit to the padded pillow cushion, and the quality of the pelican style case is very good. I think IX&DAO deserve credit because they could have taken the default option of using a plastic or cardboard watch box. This pelican style case is higher quality, and also like the emblem which is embossed on the top of the lid. So with regards to the items, Watchdives also gift this fabric strap. As you can see, good quality weave to the fabric, stainless steel buckle and tang, and I think this is a credible alternative to the mesh bracelet that comes on the piece. One also gets this 1.6mm flathead jeweler's screwdriver. As you can see, good quality with a rotating head, stainless steel body, nailed shank, and also nailed head. One also gets this Watchdives thank you card, and on the reverse it has the customer service email, service@watchdives.com. The watch is covered by the usual 3-year international warranty, which is very good. Usually at this price point one would expect a 2-year international warranty, so to get 3 years of warranty from Watchdives is very good. And lastly, one also gets this disc, and as you can see, it has the IX&DAO crest, and on the reverse we have EPOS, because on the watch it says Friends of EPOS on the dial at 6 o'clock, so nice to get this included. So with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is the IX&DAO 5303. The watch is clearly an homage to the Serica 5303, so very similar proportions to the 5033. We have a 40mm case diameter. We have a 48mm lug-to-lug measurement, a thickness of 12.6mm, and a lug width of 20mm. The mesh bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 16mm at the sterile clasp. I would like to see IX&DAO engrave the sterile clasp with their crest, as per this disc, as you can see. And also, if I show you the case back, they've done a good job of engraving their crest in the centre of the case back, so I think it would enhance the piece if they engraved their crest also on the sterile clasp. So just bear with me and I'll do the mesh bracelet back up and then continue. So with regards to the rest of the specification, we have a double dome sapphire crystal with clear AR coating on the underside, and the clear anti-reflective coating does an excellent job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the double dome sapphire crystal. It's got a boxed top hat style profile to it, and it is very aesthetically pleasing. It does look very similar to the Serica 5303 double dome sapphire crystal, and the clear AR coating is very good. The dial is very aesthetically pleasing. It's got a glossy black enamel finish to it, and I like the contrasting red text, 200 meters equals 660 feet, and automatic in white. So the symmetry of the dial is very good. They've made the correct decision by citing the date complication at 6, and I like the black date wheel with contrasting white Arabic numerals. The proportions of the hands are correct. The minute hand extends all the way to the white minute ticks on the chaptering, and the arrowhead tip to the hour hand is also correctly proportioned because it extends to the Lume dots for the hours. The second hand is also the correct length. It extends all the way to the minute ticks, and the handset is very easy to read because the white contrasts very well with the glossy black enamel dial. Now, I think it would look better if they deleted Friends of EPOS at 6 o'clock, and I think that they should have put IX&DAO, because IX&DAO is the brand rather than Friends of EPOS. But this is subjective. Some collectors will like Friends of EPOS at 6 because, of course, it does look very similar to the Serica 5303, which also has text either side of the 6 o'clock index. Alternatively, they could have printed IX&DAO at 12 o'clock because there is that space on the dial, and that is the conventional position for brands. But however, this is an homage to the Serica 5303, and they've obviously chosen to replicate that. With regards to the bezel, it's made from ceramic and also it has a stainless steel inner portion. So as you can see, it has minutes on the outer portion and the inner portion is hours, and they've spelt hours in French as per the Serica 5303. So with regards to the bezel, it's very well finished. The ceramic has a glossy finish to it, rather matte, and it also complements the brushed satin finish of the inner stainless steel portion. Solid 316L grade stainless steel bezel, coin edge teeth, nice large chamfer to the top edge, which is mirror polished. No sharp edges to the top edges of the teeth, which is very good. The quality of the machining to the teeth is also very good. They're very grippy and tactile. The coin edge teeth feel very good to grip, but however they're not sharp, so they don't dig into the skin, and there's a beautiful luster to the bezel. As you can see, it catches the light, so it is a very well machined bezel, and IX&DAO deserve full credit for this. It's very good looking and also very comfortable to use. So let's test the bezel execution. 120 click unidirectional bezel, as one would expect. Medium resistance to it, feels very similar to a Seiko 5KX, alternatively a San Martin SN004G, if you're familiar with that. And now I like the balance of the bezel. It feels even all the way through the 360 degrees. It doesn't get tight and loose. It feels smooth all the way through the 360 degrees of rotation. No lateral side-to-side play, no back play, so it feels nice and firm. I like the medium resistance, nice loud audible clicks. Feels very pleasant, very grippy and tactile with the coin edge teeth. Now let's just check the alignment. One more click. So the Lume pip does align correctly with a 12 o'clock index on the dial. But however, if you look at the indices on the inner bezel for the hours and also the outer minute indices, if you look at the 3 o'clock position, it appears that the marker, the 3 and also the minute marker for the 15-minute mark looks slightly low when you register it against the 3 o'clock index on the dial. But if you look at the 9 o'clock on the left-hand side, you can see that the 9 o'clock and the 45-minute tick actually aligns correctly. So I think they need to correct the alignment of the bezel, not the bezel itself, because if you look at the Lume pip, it actually aligns correctly at 12 o'clock. So the alignment is correct with regards to the ratcheting mechanism, but the actual indexing, the printing or the engraving of the minutes and also the hours on the bezel itself needs to be adjusted, because if you look, the 3 o'clock index looks slightly low when one registers it against the dial, but strangely the other marks do actually line up around the dial, and the 12 o'clock Lume pip does line up. So I'm just going to check it again for consistency to make sure that the Lume pip does actually align correctly. One more click. Yes. So the Lume pip does align correctly at 12. They've got that alignment correct. So the ratcheting mechanism is correct. No lateral side-to-side play, no back play. So it's a nice tight bezel execution. But it's just a curiosity. If you look at the 3 and also the 15-minute mark, you can see they're just slightly low against the 15-minute or the 3 o'clock index on the dial. So that needs to be remade. I think that they could improve the bezel itself, the bezel insert, the ceramic bezel insert and the stainless steel bezel itself. But the other indices do align correctly, so that's something to note. With regards to the crown, it's solid 316L grade stainless steel, sterile as per the Serica 5303, which this is an homage to. Personally, I think it would look more aesthetically pleasing if they engraved the crest, the IX&DAO crest, as per the case back. But however, I appreciate this is an homage to the Serica, and therefore they've made it look very similar with this sterile crown. Coin edge finished and mirror polished domed cap to it, so it's very low profile, doesn't dig into the back of the hand or wrist. Let's test the screw down crown execution. The screw down crown provides an effective hermetic seal to 200 meters, which is very good specification. Now it feels smooth, it's not silky smooth. In terms of smoothness, it's not as smooth as a San Martin SN004G, which you may be familiar with, and it's not as silky smooth as on a Pagani designed PD1661, for example, but it does feel smooth. One can feel the friction of the internal O-ring inside the stainless steel crown tube, and also the second rubber O-ring inside the crown itself. One can feel the friction of the O-rings. The threading does feel smooth, although it's not the smoothest crown I've experienced. It does unscrew very well. So this is the PT5000 version, and as I've detailed, this 5303 is available with the SW200-1 and also the ETA2824-2. This PT5000 isn't as smooth to manually wind as an SW200-1. It's not as smooth to manually wind as an NH35A, for example, which you will be familiar with. But however, one can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up in the caliber PT5000, so one can manually wind it. Pulling it out to the first click position is the quick set date complication. I'm just going to move the minute hand out of the way to show you better. So in the first click position, rotating the crown clockwise advances the quick set date complication. They've made the correct decision by sighting the date complication at 6 because it retains the symmetry and the balance of the dial rather than using the default option of the 3 o'clock position. 6 o'clock is the same as the Serica 5303. And they could have used the white date wheel with black Arabic numerals, but I like the black date wheel with white Arabic numerals because it blends into the dial very well, but also the white Arabic numerals are clearly legible. So the quick set complication works very well. The PT5000 has the characteristic of it clicks over with a lighter click than the NH35A. There's no discernible difference between the quick set complication of the PT5000 and the SW200-1 and the ETA2824-2. The PT5000 is of course a clone of the ETA2824-2, so it feels very similar. The architecture of the movement is identical. So lighter click over than on the NH35A, but it does work very well. Pulling it out to the second click position hacks the movement. If you look at the second hand, it's possible to set the time precisely to the second. So we're now in the time setting position. It feels smooth clockwise and anti-clockwise, and again it's a characteristic of the PT5000 that it has a lighter resistance than the NH35A. There's no discernible difference between the PT5000 and the SW200-1 and the ETA2824-2. They have that characteristic lighter resistance, but it does feel smooth. Now, with regards to the PT5000, it's sometimes the case that they are unreliable, and usually the problems are because they're not correctly lubricated in the factory. And the ones that aren't lubricated correctly often seize up because there's too much friction in the gearing, particularly in the winding gear. The ones that are made by HK Precision Technology are genuine PT5000s and they are lubricated correctly. This one is a genuine HK Precision Technology PT5000. It is lubricated correctly and one can feel it because it's clearly well lubricated. It feels silky smooth. Setting the time and also manually winding feels smoother. They feel gritty when a PT5000 hasn't been lubricated correctly because the winding gears feel dry and one can feel the friction of the teeth binding against each other. So one can immediately tell if the PT5000 has enough lubricants or not. This one does. So pushing it back in restarts the movement and has a nice positive click. Let's test screwing the crown back down. Immediate thread pickup, so there's a perfect interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. So it is smooth, although one does feel the friction of the O-rings compressing, and I'm absolutely confident because of the friction that this would provide an effective hermetic seal to 200 meters. Right, so I'll show you the case back. Solid 316L grade stainless steel case back, concentric CNC lathe tool machining to the centre section. I like the way the CNC lathe tool machining refracts the light. It's engraved with the IX&DAO crest to a high standard and also IX&DAO branding, and the circumference is engraved with the specification of the piece to a high standard. It feels nice and smooth and it feels like a sterile case back when against the wrist. The engraving doesn't feel sharp, so they've done a good job of the engraving. It's very high definition and it's good to see the specification and the reference number engraved. The milled slots are very well executed, no sharp edges, no burrs to the milled slots. And although it's a bubble back case back, it is relatively low profile, bearing in mind that this houses the PT5000 automatic. And I like the fact that this is only 12.6mm thick, even though it has a boxed top hat style double dome sapphire crystal. So the case back is very flat. sits very smooth and low profile against the wrist. The underside to the head of the piece is mirror polished to flawless standard, no sharp edges to the case. The head of the piece is very well finished. I've also got nice chamfers on the tips to the lug so they don't dig into the skin. So it's a very well executed, well finished underside to the flanks of the case. Now, the mesh bracelet is slippery to get a grip of when I'm wearing my gloves, so just bear with me. I'm going to remove my glove and then I'll give you a wrist shot, because it's quite tricky to engage the end of the mesh strap with the clasp. So just bear with me and I'll do it. It's easy to get a grip of it when I've got a bare finger and thumb. So just bear with me and I'll do it up. There we are. So on a positive note, I'm pleased to report it fits my 8-inch wrist. Now, it's often the case with bracelets. As you'll know from my previous reviews, I have a large 8-inch wrist. Bracelets and straps are often a fraction too short, but I can confirm this will easily fit an 8-inch wrist. I can easily slide my index finger underneath the bracelet, and as you can see, it gives a nice comfortable fit. Female pivoted end links are very good. They allow the end of the mesh bracelet to articulate very well, so one gets a very snug fit. And it's got a nice curved profile, as you can see. Just going to put my glove back on. Now, in case you're wondering why do I wear gloves in my reviews, I appreciate it looks pretentious when I'm handling a watch which isn't a high-tier piece. The purpose of wearing gloves is it prevents me putting smudges and fingerprints on the polished surfaces and the crystal of a watch when handling it, and it also helps my camera autofocus. So I appreciate wearing gloves looks pretentious, but actually does serve a purpose. So as you can see, nice curved profile to the undercut to the case. The female pivoted end links allow the bracelet to articulate very well. With regards to proportions, they've made the correct decision. 20 down to 16 is the industry standard. And I think the 20mm lug width works very well with a 40mm head of the piece. 48mm lug-to-lug measurement is the sweet spot. That is the perfect lug-to-lug measurement for a 40mm head of the piece, regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7-inch wrist or a 7 to 8-inch wrist respectively. 40 by 48 is the perfect dimension for all wrist sizes. 20 to 16 is the perfect taper. That is, again, the industry standard. So the proportions of this IX&DAO 5303 are perfection personified. The thing I most like about it is it's only 12.6mm thick. And as I detailed, with the low profile case back, it actually sits very snug and flat against the wrist. And if you have a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches, you'll particularly enjoy the fact that it sits very close to the wrist. Needless to say, anything under 13mm will easily slip underneath the shirt cuff if you wear business shirts, and therefore it's an ideal daily wear piece. I like the large mirror polished bezels to the edges of the case. As you can see, they contrast with the inner portion, which is brushed satin finish, and it catches the light very well. So the case finishing is excellent. I also really like the contrast of the glossy black ceramic portion to the bezel insert and the inner portion of the stainless steel brushed satin finish bezel. It just looks very aesthetically pleasing. The boxed top hat style crystal, which is double domed, doesn't have any distortion and it's very aesthetically pleasing. The AR coating works very well. Legibility is outstanding. The white hands contrast very well with the glossy black enamel dial. So good looking piece, very comfortable to wear, feels very well balanced. It's only 114 grams on the mesh bracelet, and that's the advantage of using a mesh bracelet versus using an oyster style or Jubilee style bracelet. Beautiful luster to the mesh bracelet, and this 20 to 16 taper is good. The only thing I would prefer is if it had a flip lock clasp, or alternatively a deployant clasp, rather than the cross-cutting measure of this clasp, and of course if they engrave the IX&DAO crest, because that would add some interest to it, but it is incredibly comfortable. So very lightweight piece, 114 grams. It feels like the kind of heft one would expect if one was wearing this on a rubber or leather strap or a NATO strap. 114 is very light for a 40mm head of the piece. Proportions are excellent, so good that it fits an 8-inch wrist, and also the mesh bracelet itself articulates very well, as you can see. Doesn't rattle. And the end links also articulate very smoothly. I'll just check the other side. As you can see, the female pivoted end links work very well, and they've got screws in. And also it's very well made because the end of the mesh bracelet engages with the end link with 2 screws as well. So it's very secure. One can tighten the screws, and it also has 2 second screws. It uses conventional spring bars, and as it's a 20mm, one could also fit this on a leather or NATO strap or a rubber strap, and it's good to have that option of the conventional spring bars, although it does have these screwed end links. So I like the articulation of the end links. The end links themselves are a good tight fit to the case. There's no play. I'll just check the other side for comparison. Nice tight fit. So they've done a good job of fitting the end links to the head of the piece, and they do articulate very smoothly. So very good. So IX&DAO deserve credits for a well executed bracelet. Right, so let's do a Lume test and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it has not disappointed. So this uses C3 Superluminova. There's a good colour tone match between the Lume pip on the bezel and also the printed indices and also the hour hands, as you can see in the minute hand. So good green tone colour match. This is clearly 5 to 6 layers of application on the Lume pip, the dial and also the hands. I like the perfect symmetry of the dial as per the Serica 5303, which this is an homage to. And I really like that they haven't used any cross-cutting measure. For example, they could have applied 2 to 3 layers of C3 Superluminova. This is clearly 5 to 6. It's glowing incredibly brightly, and it will continue to glow for a good length of time. Now, I really like C3, and it does fit the aesthetic of this piece. I think had they used BGW9 glowing in blue, it wouldn't have suited the watch as well. By using green C3, it does look more like tritium, so it does give the watch a more vintage aesthetic. The indices are well proportioned on the dial. One can clearly orientate the 12 o'clock index on the dial because we have 2 dots either side of the 12 o'clock index, and also the 9 and 6 have large rectangular indices and then a small index below the date complication at 6. So easy to read, easy to orientate. One can easily differentiate between the pointed minute hand and also the arrowhead tip to the hour hand, and we also have a Lume pip on the sweeping second hand. So very well executed, as you can see, continuing to glow brightly. It's 10 out of 10 C3 Superluminova. Right, so let's discuss the movement used. Now, you'll all be familiar with the PT5000 Automatic, which is made by HK Precision Technology in China. Now, my opinion of the PT5000 has changed over the last 2 years. Initially, I thought the PT5000 was equal in quality to the Sellita SW200-1 and the ETA 2824-2. The PT5000 is a clone of the ETA 2824-2. The architecture of the movement is identical. It has 25 joules. The only difference in the architecture to the SW200-1 is that has an additional joule added. The SW200-1 has 26 joules. The PT5000 has 25 joules. But my opinion's changed with regards to the reliability, because over the last 2 years I've read increasing reports of reliability issues with the PT5000. Sometimes they fail with repeated manual winding, and as I've detailed, the usual cause of a failure of a PT5000 is they aren't lubricated correctly. The original PT5000s were made by HK Precision Technology, but they've since been cloned and they're made by other factories. And one can tell if the PT5000 is original or if it's a clone because they don't have the HK Precision Technology marking on the bridge on the main plate. So this one is correct. It is an original PT5000 made by HK Precision Technology, and it has been lubricated correctly. One can immediately tell the difference, as I've detailed. When you unscrew a PT5000 and you're in the manual wind position, if it hasn't been lubricated correctly, it feels gritty, it feels rough to manually wind. One can feel the friction of the teeth on the gearing binding together. When one has a genuine HK Precision Technology PT5000, it feels more lubricated because it feels smoother. Now, it's not as smooth as an SW200-1, but one can feel the smoothness of the lubricant on the gears, making them mesh with low friction rather than feeling gritty. So this one is well lubricated, and therefore I'm confident it's going to be reliable, but it's something to note. The PT5000 does have some reports of unreliability. It's not as reliable, it's not as well proven as the SW200-1, and it's not as well proven as the ETA 2824-2. So one does have the option. You can pay $329 for the SW200-1, or you can pay $399 for the ETA 284-2. So if you're concerned about the PC5000's reliability, you do have those two options. The question is it worth paying the extra? Personally, I think it's better to take the risk. This one does feel well lubricated. It's $259 and therefore it's significantly less expensive than the $329 of the SW200-1 version. So with regards to the specification, exactly the same architecture as the 284-2. It has 25 joules. It runs at 28,800 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 4 Hz. It has hand winding and hacking, which is useful complications, and a 40-hour power reserve, which is perfectly acceptable. The stated accuracy of the PT5000 is plus or minus 12 seconds per day. So similar to an Elabor grade SW200-1 or an Elabor grade ETA 284-2, plus or minus 12 seconds per day is the standard when a movement is regulated in 2 positions. Now this one is running consistently at plus 6 seconds per day, which is excellent. Plus 6 is well within the plus or minus 12 per day stated accuracy. So it's clear that IX&DAO are well regulating the PT5000s they're using from HK Precision Technology. I think plus 6 is perfectly acceptable. It does feel smooth enough, so therefore that indicates this is going to be reliable. It is lubricated correctly. I like the PT5000 when it's being correctly lubricated, but really it's a gamble. It's the chance you take. You can get one that is well lubricated and sometimes they're not, and therefore they fail, and when you manually wind them they feel gritty, and then it becomes rougher and rougher to manually wind, and eventually they seize up. The other problem they can have is sometimes the rotor permanently engages. So when you're manually winding a PT5000, the winding gear actually drives the rotor, and when you're rotating the crown, you can actually feel the rotor spinning round, being driven off the crown winding gears, which it shouldn't be. It should float. It should disengage. So again, that's something you can feel. If you have a PT5000 that's going to develop a fault and fail, when you manually wind it, you'll be able to feel and hear the rotor spinning round. It should always be free. The rotor should spin clockwise and anti-clockwise freely, regardless of whether you're in the manual winding, date setting or time setting position. When one rotates the crown, if you can feel the rotor spinning, it indicates that the movement's going to seize up and you have a defective movement. Sometimes lubricating the PT5000 can cure that, so it's simply a case of removing the case back, lubricating the gears and then putting the case back on, and that actually frees it up. And the other thing that can happen is sometimes with regular use, wearing the watch and also manually winding it daily can also circulate the lubrication around the gears, and therefore that frees up the gears and the rotor. So sometimes they actually do get looser with daily wear. But that's something to bear in mind, and I just want to explain that I have changed my opinion. I used to really like the PT5000, but now I prefer the NH35A and the SW200-1 because they're more reliable and they don't have the aforementioned issues with lubrication. So last I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So this is the PT5000 version. The price point is $259 US. Really, to evaluate this piece, one needs to study the quality of the finishing throughout. The bezel is very well finished. Coin edge teeth are very well done. Beautiful lustre to the brush satin finishing on the flanks to the case. Mirror polished bevels are polished to a flawless standard. No sharp edges to the tips of the lugs. The undercut to the case doesn't have a sharp edge. Female pivoted end links articulate very smoothly. Well finished. Beautiful lustre to the mesh bracelet. No sharp edges. Doesn't pull arm hairs, and it doesn't rattle. I would like to see the clasp improved, the heavier gauge of metal used, and also engraved with the IX&DAO crest, but it does work okay. So quality of the finishing throughout is excellent. Specification is good. C3 Superluminova is 5 to 6 layers, and it is exceptional performance. Really, there is only one negative to this piece, and it is the alignment of the minute and hour marks on the bezel insert. If you look at the 3 o'clock, it's slightly low, but the Lume pip does align correctly with the 12 o'clock index on the dial. So the alignment of the bezel insert is the only issue. The ratcheting mechanism actually works well. No lateral side play, no back play, and the Lume pip aligns correctly. So there is room for refinement with regards to the bezel insert itself, but the ratcheting mechanism works to a satisfactory level. The screw down crown is smooth but not silky smooth. So I'm going to declare it good quality, and I'm going to declare it good value. I'm not going to say excellent quality and excellent value because of the bezel misalignment, but the rest of the piece, the quality of the finishing, the build's quality, quality control, and the movements are all excellent. So I'm going to recommend it to you for consideration, but bear in mind the shortcoming of the bezel misalignment. So I hope you've enjoyed my review of the IX&DAO 5303. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.